Hello, crafty friends. This is Jen, and thank you for joining me today. Today, I am making two cards for you using Spellbinders Large and Small Die of the Month for September 2024. So to start, we're going to start with the large die of the month, which is this barn, and it comes with the dies that you need to make the background if you wanted to. And there was some mountains and grass and different things like that. I didn't really want to do the mountains. I just wanted the grass. So I did use a couple of the dies to make the grass background and the dirt road going up to the barn. And they tell you on the back of the package how to cut the paper so it will fit properly, which I didn't follow. So some of it doesn't line up, but that's okay. We still came out with an amazing card. So to start, I'm going to create my background, and I wanted to make a sunset. So I'm using Distress Oxide Ink in Mustard Seed to start. And then I'm going in with Carved Pumpkin, and I'm just blending those two together. And you'll see my arm go up to get other stuff. I only have a certain amount of little holders for the pads for the Distress ink, so I had to keep swapping them out. And I also used Candied Apple to add the red to the top of the sky background. Now I'm going to do the grassy background, and for this one I used Twisted Citron, Mowed Lawn, and Rustic Wilderness. The mat I have back there is a waffle flower mat, and it has a my husband got it for me for Christmas one year, and it came with the little holder for the Distress Oxide inks. This thing is so handy, especially with the ink, because it doesn't slide around, it stays in place. You can get in there and press hard and it won't slide around, which I really like. And it's pretty easy to clean up. It does stain a little bit, but really it cleans up great. So now I'm going to do the dirt road, and for that I used Distress Oxide Ink in Tea Dye and Rusty Hinge. So I'm just going over the whole road with the tea dye first, and then just going in with the Rusty Hinge after to add a little shadow to the sides of the dirt road. And then just going back in with tea dye to blend those two together. Now before I clean up, I'm going to splatter my dirt road with Distress Spray in Antique Linen and Vintage Photo. And then I set all these pieces aside to dry. So now I'm going to start on coloring my barn. And for all my die cuts today, I colored everything with Copic markers. So I apologize for the long video, but it was definitely a lot of work, but totally worth it. So to start with the shadow color of the barn, I am using R59. And here I'm just making sure that I'm not going to not color enough because of the roof piece. So I want to make sure that I have the coverage where I need it. Now I'm going in with R29 and just blending those two together. I have been part of the Spellbinders Large Die and Small Die of the Month Club for a while now. I had done it years before and then stopped, and then just decided earlier in the year to get back into it, and I just love it. I love getting that package every month. For this part, I'm using R24, and it's just to blend all the colors together. So they came with this, it was like a frame die, And I didn't add any Copic marker to it. I'm just gluing this frame piece down around the barn, making sure that I have it on straight. And then just using my finger to dab off any excess glue. And I also didn't use any Copic markers on the barn door or the window. But I am going to color the roof. And for that, I went with the warm grays. So W8, W7, and W5. I know in the comments in previous videos, I've been asked to list all the Copic markers, but this video uses a lot of Copic markers. So I just have been adding it onto the screen and it will pop up as we go so that my description box isn't a mile long because there was a lot of Copic markers in this video. So I apologize if there's no list in the description box, but I have listed them as I go. It does pop up in the bottom of the screen. So I decided that I wanted to add like black windows to that top barn window, I guess where the hayloft is. So I just die cut, and I should have just die cut it from black paper, but this is just what I had on hand. And so I die cut it from white cardstock, and then I colored it in with the Copic marker 100, the black. And you don't have to color your die cuts. You could just cut this from red cardstock and white cardstock and just go that direction as well. And it would save you some time. I just find that when you color your die cuts, it definitely adds some dimension and just makes your cards pop. So I'm going to be coloring these trees. I'm using E59. And this is just to add the shadow to the tree trunks and the branches. And I'm just going on like kind of along where I would think where the shadows would be. And then I'm going to go in with E25. And then just blending that shadow color in with the mid-range color. And then for my last color, I'm going in with E23 and just blending that all together. Now, I am speeding this up because we literally are just doing the exact same thing all over again to make both our trees. So for the leaves on the tree, or I guess it's like these little clusters that they have. I wanted it to look like leaves, so I decided to do a stippling effect. I'm going in to start with Y17, and I'm coloring the whole thing in Y17. And my marker started running out. I was checking to see if I had any extra refills. Unfortunately, I don't think I did for this color. But I am coloring it all over with the Y17. And then I'm going to go in with my YR68. And I'm just stippling, which is just like adding little dots all over the piece. And I do this with all of them that are in this color combination. I'm just setting those other two aside because they're going to be for the other tree. And then I'm using YR09 to add the darker leaf color. And it looks kind of funny up close, but when you look far away, it does give the illusion that there are different colored leaves in that tree and that there's shadow and depth. And so I just thought that this would be a kind of neat way of showing different colored leaves when it's not really all these little tiny leaf dies. For this one, I'm using R35 to start for, and I didn't like the coral. Once I got everything on there, I didn't really like the coral color. It was a little too pink. But I do go over it with a different red. So then I'm going in with R29 and I'm just doing the exact same thing I did with the other tree leaves, just this time it's red colors. And right now where I live in Canada, I'm just outside of Toronto, Ontario, and it is starting to get cold and it's fall and it's so pretty. It's my favorite time of year. And I love the color of the leaves changing. That's one of my favorite things. So this card was fun to make. And like I said earlier, I didn't really like that coral color, so I went in with the R14. And that made it a little more red, which was what I was looking for. So I have those done. And now I'm just going to put my little tree together. So someone mentioned about wanting to see the glue bottle in a previous comment on another video. This is the fine tip bottle that you get with KarenBurniston.com. It has that little metal pin that goes right through and it cleans out your tip every time you use it. The Lineco Neutral pH you can get also at KarenBurniston.com, or you can get bigger bottles at Amazon. But if you are in a cold climate place like myself, order before Christmas or order before winter comes. This glue does not do well in the wintertime. It can't be frozen or it will separate and then you won't be able to use it. So if you are in a cold climate area, then make sure that you order it before the winter comes and stock up if you really like this glue. Because it does separate, and I did have that happen. Not even thinking, ordered it in the wintertime, and by the time I went to use it, I was like, whoa, what's wrong with this glue? Thankfully, KarenBurniston.com was really, really great about replacing it. So that was really, really wonderful, given that it had been a few months since I'd bought it. So now I'm going to start on the second tree, and I'm just doing exactly the same steps as before. Except this time I did go in with the light rouge instead of the coral color. And then we'll glue that onto the tree. And I tried to make this tree just a little bit different, so they didn't look exactly the same. And you could put the branches in the front or the branches in the back. It's entirely up to you what you'd like to do. Which is the nice part about card making. You can decide to do whatever you want. And if you're interested in these kits, you don't have to be part of the large and small die of the club or of the month. They do sell them separately after they've come out. So if you just want to get the large die or the small die or both, you can get those at spellbinders.com or scrapbook.com. Although I'm not sure if they sell the kits at scrapbook.com, but definitely spellbinders.com. So I'm just adding a little bit of shadow to the fence here, and I'm using the warm grays, so W1. And now I'm going to create my little pumpkins. So these little top parts are just the stem, and then it holds onto the pumpkins all so that they're like a cluster of 3. For this, I'm using YR09 to create the pumpkins. And then I'm going to go in with my lighter orange color, which is the YR68, and then the honey yellow color. And I do this, I did the same for all 6 pumpkins. And again, you could color these different colors too. There are so many pretty colored pumpkins out there. For the small die of the month, I actually did do different colored pumpkins. And you could definitely do that with this card as well. So I'm just going to glue my little pumpkins on, and they do glue on in a certain way. So it's the kind of elongated pumpkin first, and then the small round one, and then the big wide one goes in the middle. So I just added a couple little dots of glue on either side, and then set those aside. And we're going to do the same thing for this set too. Now moving on, we're going to create these sunflowers. So in the original card design that came with the kit that you see on the back, the sunflowers were kind of like in the front. It was almost like you were peeking over sunflowers to see the barn. And it's a neat idea. I wasn't going to use it like that. And then when I get to the end, I realize that I don't want to put the sunflowers in this card, but I do use them in the next card. I think sunflowers are my favorite flower. They're so pretty. We did grow some in my backyard one year, and the squirrels ate every little bit of them. So for the for the inside of the sunflower, I'm using E49, E59, and then E25. And I'm just blending those together. Normally I'd add little darker dots onto it, but I didn't feel like it needed it because the die cut actually came with those little indents to make it look like the little seeds in the center of the sunflower. For this one, I went with different yellow colors so that they weren't exactly the same. So I'm using the Y17, the Y15 to blend that together. And then we're going in with Y02. But the center for both flowers, I did exactly the same. And I like to clean my glass tabletop up after I color each color, because sometimes if I forget and then I go to color something that's, say, yellow and I've used brown or green, it blends into that. So I always try and make sure that I clean my workstation after every color. So for the leaves, I'm going in with G29. And this set, it was really neat. It almost looks like a little barbell. But what's great about it is you can use it left or right. So the way that they've done it is that you could use this flower stem in any direction. I know these Spellbinders die sets, they certainly do think of everything. They have all kinds of little bits and so you could add on, or I just think they're great. I highly recommend even if it was just the small die. They used to have packages where you could get, you could choose different ones, but I love the large die and the small die of the month. So for the bushes, so these are actually the leaves of the trees, and I decided I wanted to add some bushes along my pathway. So I used the G99 and then the YG colors to give it that kind of mossy color to the bushes. So let's put the card together now. I'm going to start by putting my grass down, and then my road, and then from there I just add all my little bits and pieces together. So I'm just adding the last little bits onto this card. And even though some of it hangs over, we can just trim that. And I'm just making sure I'm giving this a good press down. But I thought it needed some shadow. It needed some dimensions. So I'm going in with E35 to add some shadow to like under the bushes and the barn, just to make that pop a little more. And then I also wanted to do the same thing with the grassy area. So I went in with G14. I didn't want it to be too dramatic, so I just went in with the light color. It was a little difficult getting in between the fence area. But I think it looked really good once I added the shadow to it. And again, just making sure I'm pressing all those things, all those little pieces down. And this is where I was like, I don't think I'm going to add the sunflowers. I don't want it to cover up all the little pumpkins and the bushes. And so this is where I decided not to use some. So I'm just trimming off the excess on the sides with my craft scissors. And I'm using Spellbinders Fall Greetings. Unfortunately, it's a stamp set that is no longer available. And I'm going to stamp a sentiment on my dirt road. For my ink I'm using Fawn's Jet Black ink. And I do stamp it 3 or 4 times, not because I'm out of ink, but because it's on Distress Oxide ink, and I find that it fades out no matter how much you dry the Distress Oxide ink. So if you know of a black ink that doesn't fade on Distress ink, please let me know in the comments below, because that would be really great. So now I need to put my card on my card base, and for my card base for both cards today, I'm using Lawn Fawn's Ground Coffee cardstock, and these are A2 size cards, so I'm scoring that at 4 1/4. And then folding that in half, making sure I have a good crisp fold with my bone folder. Now I'm going to be adding that on using double-sided adhesive tape, and it's a 1/4 inch double-sided adhesive tape. I usually buy this in bulk on eBay. And it lasts me, I think this batch has lasted me, I want to say 3 years, which is pretty amazing given the amount of cards that I make. But I usually buy 2 sizes, 1/5 of an inch and 1/4 of an inch. So there's our first card done. So moving on, we're going to be making a card using the small die of the month for September, which is this super cute little scarecrow. Now, unfortunately, I didn't realize that when I was making the background for this card, I wasn't recording, even though I thought I was. For that background, I did use Distress Oxide ink in Tumbled Glass, Salty Ocean, Mowed Lawn, Rustic Wilderness, and Ground Espresso, I believe. And so now I'm going to start coloring all of the die cuts for my little scarecrow. I started with this with these blues. I didn't like that last color I used, so I went over it a few times with this lighter blue color. And now I'm just adding the little pocket to his overalls. Now for the scarecrows, it's almost like a sweater. I wanted it to be checkerboard. So this is my technique to make a checkerboard, and you can use any color. It doesn't have to be red. You can use this technique for every color of plaid shirt you want to make. So I'm just going to blend all my colors together to start. And I'm using the usual red combination, going in with my R14 to blend it all together. And then I went over again with R24, what I had left of it. Now, I'm going to use my colorless blender, and I just make lines going vertically to start. And they don't have to be overly pronounced. It just has to be enough that you can see it. And then I go over it horizontally, and that's what makes the checkerboard look. And because it's kind of faded, it doesn't stand out more than anything else, but it just gives the illusion of a plaid shirt. So I'm going to color in the hat next, which really reminded me of the sorting hat from Harry Potter as I was coloring it. And I'm using E59 to add the shadow and the folds of the hat. And then I'm using E25 and then I'm going in with E23 and then just blending that all together nicely. So now I'm going to create the little band that goes around the hat using Y17, Y15, and Y11. And then just making sure that that's on properly. And now we're going to make the little scarecrow's face. This set also comes with, you could make a pumpkin face or a scarecrow face. And I didn't want to use the pumpkin face. I wanted to use the scarecrow face. So I decided to use this one. But they do have the little jack-o'-lantern face that you could use for this instead if you didn't want to make a scarecrow. And I wanted to make sure that I had space for the his little handkerchief neck scarf. And for that, I went in with the greens G07 and YG25. And then added that onto my my little scarecrow's body. And now you can really see him coming together. So I wanted to make the hair like straw, like the straw that's coming out of the hands and the feet. So I used YR24, YR12, and then YR31. And now we're just going to add that to the top of his head. Oh my gosh, he's so cute. I just loved how this little guy turned out. The first thing I did when my daughter came home from school was, come and see my little scarecrow. He is so adorable. And then these are not really hands and feet. They're more just like little straw sticking out. So I went in with the same colors as the hair. And then all you have to do is just add a little dab of ink and then glue those onto the arms and legs. And now I'm going to color in the pole that he's going to be on. So for that, I'm using E37. And then we're going to use E35. And E31. So this is where the fun part starts. I'm going to be making 4 different colored pumpkins. I went with a basic pumpkin to start, and then I'm going to create 3 different pumpkins. So what I did was I went on Google and I was just like, let's look at pumpkins, and found 4 pumpkins that I really, really liked. And I just thought this would be kind of neat. I know in a previous video, I mentioned that I grew pumpkins in my own garden this year. When they started growing, they were green with spots, and I thought, oh, isn't that neat? And then as they got bigger, they started changing color to orange. Now they're really orange, and they're ready to be cut off the stem. So I decided to make a green one, and then I just kind of added little spots using my colorless blender. For this one, I seen this really neat pumpkin that was like a white color, but up the ridges or the little indents, it was orange. So I thought, oh, that's kind of neat. So I didn't want it to make it look like lines because it doesn't look like just straight lines on the pumpkin. So I kind of did the shadow with the darker orange and then stippled the honey color on. And then to just give it some dimension, I went in with the Y1 to make it look a little rounder. For this one, I went with an orange and green pumpkin, and I did the same thing, added the color onto where the orange is, and then up the indents, or I don't know what you'd call that, but where it kind of sinks in and gives it that bulging look, I went in with the green. And again, I did the stippling effect as well with the YG07, just like I did with the other pumpkin. So that it doesn't look like it's just a straight line going up and down. And I'm going to color in all these little leaves and vines and bits and pieces. And for all of them, I use the same color combination, which is the dark green, medium green. I had to, which is, sorry, G29. But I did notice that I had a little bits that were still stuck in a couple of my leaves, so I had to use my X-Acto knife to trim those pieces out. And I decided to go and do the dark color on all of my little leaves first. And then I went in and colored everything with the other colors after. And there's two different sizes of leaves. There's a larger leaf and then a smaller leaf. And then there's a vine, and then it gives you the pumpkin stem. But I thought if you turn that upside down, it almost looks like the little flower that grows before the pumpkin grows. So I did die cut 3 extras to add some little yellow flowers on my vines to really make it look like a pumpkin patch. My pumpkin was still, like, my plants were still growing leaves, like little flowers, even after I had 7 or 8 pumpkins already fully grown, orange, ready to be picked. The thing was still growing. I think it's stopped now, but it did overtake my flower beds, my raised beds. It went everywhere into my neighbor's backyard. She ended up with a pumpkin. It just went wild. So if you grow pumpkins, have a lot of space, or don't plant 5 plants all so close together. So this is where I'm making those little flowers. And they are a pretty bright color. Kind of like a squash plant would grow too. Now this set comes with a little sign that says Hello Pumpkin. And so I'm going to color that in with different E colors. So E37, E35, E31. And then I decided I didn't like that being so light. So I do go back in and color it darker. And for the sign, I'm using E35, E53, and then blending those two together on both of my little signs, and then E50. Now you could use any color you wanted for the signs, and you could also go over it with a fine tip pen if you wanted to, as well, to darken up that Hello Pumpkin. And then I just added 2 little dabs of glue. And then I kind of put my sign on an angle there. So it also comes with a crow, because you can't have a scarecrow without a crow. And for the for the crow, I used the N8, N6, N4, and of course the 100 black. This little crow is so funny. He looks pretty good, and then you put the eye on, and he just makes me laugh. So for the eye, I just added the white dot that it comes with, and then I went in with a fine tip black pen and added the pupil, and then I went in with my white jelly pen and just added a little dot to the eye and a little shine line to his beak. Okay, so now we can put our card together, but I realized that I didn't have my pumpkin stems yet colored, so I colored those quickly just with G28. And this is kind of where I decided, where I wanted everything put together. I glued my Scarecrow onto his pole first. And then it was easy to just put him wherever I wanted to put him. At first I thought I'll center it, but I moved it over a little bit more. And just gluing that down. So it's just a little off center. Now, these are the eyes and nose, and I just colored them in with the 100 black. Now, a lot of this I had to press down by hand. Because it's so layered, it just, my little crafting blocks aren't holding it down completely. And I'm just, now that those eyes are in, I decided I think he needs some patches. Like he's been patched up a couple times by the farmer. So I went in with E35, and then I just used my fine tip pen to add little X's to make it look like stitch marks. And I just thought that that was so cute afterwards. So I'm just trying to figure out where I want everything to go. I always have a plan to start, and then I get to this point, and then I'm like, maybe my plan isn't so great. I'm going to change it. And it's just a lot of, figuring out where you want all the little pieces to go. So I'm just adding all the little leaves. And then more vines. And you could always add more vines. This could just be a huge pumpkin patch if you wanted. And then just adding some leaves off to the side and kind of filling in some of that space. And I'm just adding my little crow to my Scarecrow's pole. And then figuring out where I want to put my other two pumpkins. And then adding my stems to the pumpkins before I forget. And then you can see those little flowers. Like it's gonna, like our little pumpkin patch isn't quite finished growing yet. So here I decided to put the stems on first, just so I didn't forget. And then I'm just gluing those two other pumpkins down. And then adding lots of leaves just to give it a little something extra. I love that you have all these little pieces that you can just add as filler and make your card look full. And so this is where I decided I have to add a sunflower. I can't go without one sunflower. I thought about adding both of them, but they're large, so I didn't want to take up all the space in the front of the card. So I thought, you know what, I'll just add one sunflower to the side. So I'm going to glue the stem onto the back of the flower and then the leaf on. And then from there, I can just trim off what I don't need. And I think that actually it looked perfect on the side there for this card. And then I decided I wanted to add a sentiment stamp in that top left corner. Maybe add a little more of my little flowers. And like I said, because there was so many layers, I really had to push down with my hands to make sure that, everything was in place. And now I'm just trimming off my excess bits off the side. And I'm going to use my MISTI stamping tool to stamp my sentiment. For this one, instead of using black ink, I used Versamark ink and I used white embossing powder. And these great little containers you can get at Simon Says Stamps. And they hold your embossing powder. And they have a little spoon for you to use, which is very handy. Normally they have a tab at the top of the lid, but mine broke off. So I have to use my tweezers to dig out my spoon every time I use my embossing powder. And for this card, I also used the other half of my ground coffee cardstock. It's great that one piece can make 2 cards. And I'm just making sure I have a good fold on that. Using my double-sided adhesive to put it down. I did put an extra piece on this one because the heat embossing kind of bent it just a little bit. I wanted to make sure that it would sit nice and flat. And there's our finished cards. So I highly recommend checking out the small and large die of the month. Thank you so much for stopping by today. Have a great day. See you next time.